Thank you. Good evening, and welcome to the 2025 Democracy Awards. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the National Endowment for Democracy, I'm honored to welcome you all to this evening where we're going to reflect on these themes: faith, freedom, and courage. You know, we're here at a time that's incredibly consequential. We've seen today the passing of former Vice President Dick Cheney, a storied public servant. We're in the midst of a government shutdown. There's urgent things happening all around the world. And here we are. We're here in the midst of a season where there's a lot of hand-wringing about what the role is of the United States in the world. And there's some who say, well, you're not a virtuous nation. You shouldn't have anything to do with anyone. There's others that say, oh, it's a complete waste of time, it's too expensive, and don't bother. Well, we completely reject both of those worldviews. And why is it that we reject that? We reject it because we are tethered by the observation of our founders, who centuries ago, when they were creating our Bill of Rights as Americans, in the First Amendment, the first freedom that they articulated was the freedom to worship. Now, why was that? That's because they knew it was at the heart of everything, wasn't it? Because if you've got the ability to tell a tyrant, no, there's somebody more significant than you who I choose to worship, who I choose to give my real allegiance to, who I give my eternal allegiance to, you're just a temporal power. You're fading in a generation or two. Friends, that attitude of our founders was scandalous. It was scandalous then, and it's scandalous tonight, and we're going to hear more about that. So I think we've got to recognize that this idea is not, it doesn't come to us, and it's not an idea of arrogance on our part or a notion of aggression. It's awareness. It's fundamentally understanding something that is so profound and deep and is clear to us that we in the endowment and others who are like-minded recognize we have an obligation to stand up for those who recognize this kindling within themselves. Tonight's going to be a good night. And I promise you, you're going to walk away from the end of this program encouraged and ready to do more. Now, I want to recognize my colleagues on the board of directors. And can I just say that this board of directors is really delightful because everybody plays nice and really does a remarkable job. So, current board members, would you please stand and be recognized? And the former board members who also played nice, will you please stand and be recognized? And you have a deep understanding of the endowment and our close relationship with the core institutes. I want to recognize the board chairs of those institutes: International Republican Institute's Chairman Senator Dan Sullivan, Solidarity Center's Liz Schuler, the National Endowment, or the National Democratic Institute's chairman, former Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, and the Center for International Private Enterprise's chairman, Greg Ledbedev. Let's give them a round, please. And finally, it's really my privilege to introduce someone whose presence here tonight really captures this moment. And she doesn't capture it by any choice of hers. In fact, she would rather not capture it. Grace Jin Drexel is the daughter of Pastor Ezra Migri Jin, the senior pastor of Beijing's Zion Church, who was recently imprisoned. We're going to hear from her in a minute, but I want to put this into a context that I found helpful this afternoon as I was listening to Grace reflect at lunch. There was a Bible translator named J.B. Phillips, who is a contemporary of C.S. Lewis. He was British. He was in that era in the 50s and 60s. And he spent his entire career in Bible translation. And he wrote a book, which is a memoir, reflecting on his time and his studies. And he made an observation about first century Christians that really rings true today, and particularly in the life of Pastor Jin. This is what Phillips wrote about the first century Christians that he was studying. He goes, "I was impressed by the fact that the New Testament letters were written not only in some holy retreats, but sometimes in prison and from ordinary Christian homes. Moreover, they were written to people who were called to live Christian lives in a thoroughly pagan world. Moral standards of all kinds were low, and there was nothing remotely resembling Christian public opinion. There were no Sundays, no church buildings, no leisure. Slavery was everywhere, and so was dire poverty and unrelieved sickness and disease. Great persecutions hadn't started yet, but smaller ones had. A man could lose not only his friends, but his livelihood in a place like Ephesus if it became known publicly that he didn't believe in the goddess Diana. A man could easily be looked at askance if he disowned the local gods, and if he could be considered very odd if he broke from his colleagues' alcoholic revelings. And it would have been easy to frame a man with a charge that he set Jesus Christ above the Roman emperor." That's exactly what Pastor Jin has done. He has said to the Chinese Communist Party, "You are not my emperor. My Savior is my emperor, and it is him alone whom I serve." And that is so scandalous and so provocative that the only thing that they can figure out to do is to put him in prison. And so our responsibility tonight is to make sure that we are giving voice as we can to people like Pastor Jin and others who are suffering. This is not theoretical. This is real time, real suffering, and we're going to hear about this. But we're going to be joyful and buoyant as a result of these testimonies that we will hear tonight. So Grace, will you please honor us here at the stage?
Thank you so much, Peter. You have said it much better than me, so I should really just go home right now. So thank you. On October 10th, my father, Pastor Ezra Jin, was taken by the Chinese authority along with nearly 30 pastors and church leaders from Zion Church. This has been the largest crackdown on an independent house church in China in the last 40 years. 22 church leaders now remain in prison with him. Because of the prominence of the church and the brazenness of the Chinese repression, their case has become an international incident that has been profiled by New York Times, Wall Street Journal, BBC, Associated Press, and beyond. Many of them are taken in front of their young families who now they leave behind. My father and several other older leaders struggle with various health issues, and we are deeply concerned about their treatment in prison. I'm here today to plead for my father and the 22 others because there is a window of opportunity in the next 10 days or so before they are indicted and formally arrested. I asked the Chinese government to release all these Zion Church members immediately and unconditionally. My father's church, Zion Church, was founded in 2007 with a mission to be faithful to God's word and to serve families and communities around us. We are not opposed to the Chinese authorities, and the church has always sought to enrich the Chinese society. My father is now arrested because he loves China and had the opportunity to leave China, but always chose to minister to the Chinese people and serve the society that he loves. They merely asked to be free from the control of the Chinese Communist Party and the decision of the church, including who can attend, who can be baptized, what sermons to be preached, what songs of worship they can sing. The Chinese Communist Party seeks to control everything and everyone in China, including the most intimate part of us, which is our beliefs. However, as many people here sitting in the audience and online can attest, that as powerful as the Chinese Communist Party and other authoritarian governments are, they will never be able to take that away from us. And even in the case of Zion's own history, We've already seen how governments' attempts to coerce and control the faith have backfired, laying bare the hollowness of authoritarian ideology and strength of faith, and ultimately growing the church. In 2018, the government seized our assets and sanctuary, but could not overcome the spirit of faith and love that animates the community. That pressure put us to develop a hybrid online-offline model that went nationwide, growing the church to the largest it's ever been, often reaching 10,000 individuals daily. As a Christian, we see that the Bible shows us that empires have always sought to control people and try to take the place of God. It may be the Pharaoh, king of Babylon, or Caesar. But those empires came and went, and none were ultimately successful. I believe despite all the latest authoritarian technology, strategies, and tactics, these new empires will not succeed today. My father wrote a letter in prison that his lawyer was able to bring out that really highlights for us to take courage, for God is with us and he will strengthen us. We also believe in miracles, and we are praying for the full release of all 23 imprisoned pastors today. I'm so grateful for everyone here today, grateful for Ned and all those who worked so hard to make tonight happen. Thank you for all the leaders of this country and leaders of the countries around the world who stands with us in our fight against religious oppression. And most of all, thank you to all the brave, countless individuals who stand up to oppression in China and around the world, serving as an example for all of us. Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the stage Vice Chair of the National Endowment for Democracy, Eileen Donahoe.
Thank you so much, Grace, for starting us off so beautifully by bearing witness to your father's faith and courage. His story is very meaningful to me personally because of a formative experience I had living in Tianjin after college in 1981 and 82, where I regularly attended Mass with my Chinese friends at an underground Catholic church. We would go very quietly, late at night, in the dark, trying not to be observed, and I'd never before that imagined that people could be put in such serious jeopardy just for practicing their faith. Your father's story fits right into this year's Democracy Awards, where our aim is to honor the quiet strength of all those brave enough to risk persecution for practicing their religious beliefs or defending liberty. Every year, the National Endowment for Democracy presents two different awards, the Democracy Award and the Democracy Service Medal. The Democracy Award goes to people whose lives show us that the yearning for freedom, religious liberty, and human dignity is not culture-bound, but is inherent in the human person. In the past, this award has gone to leaders like Václav Havel and Violeta Chamorro. The Democracy Service Medal honors individuals whose lifetime of service has left an indelible mark on the cause of freedom. Past recipients have included His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, President Tsai Ing-wen of Taiwan, champions of freedom from both political parties here in the United States, underscoring that the defense of democracy is not a partisan issue, but is rather a shared and enduring commitment rooted in our deepest values. These awards are tributes to the people who show us what courage looks like in practice, people who continue to speak, build, and believe even, even when it would be easier and safer to stop. The essence of the award is symbolized by a replica of the goddess of democracy, a statue that was raised by Chinese students in Tiananmen Square in 1989. While the actual statue stood for only a few days before being crushed by tanks, the image endures as a living symbol, reminding us that even when power prevails, for a moment, the human spirit will not be defeated. That spirit lives on in the people we honor tonight. Courageous leaders like Pastor Wang Yi, who was imprisoned in China in 2018, along with hundreds in his congregation for the simple act of worship. That fearless determination can be seen in Rushan Abbas, who has turned grief into resolve by leading the Uyghur movement for freedom even after her sister, Dr. Gulshan Abbas, was disappeared by Chinese authorities in Xinjiang in retaliation for Rushan's work. That undying commitment to freedom can be seen in the life of Xiao, a Chinese-born physicist and activist and founder of the China Digital Times, who's been living in exile since the Tiananmen slaughter. Xiao has worked tirelessly to help Chinese citizens use technology to evade CCP's censorship and surveillance and to tell their own stories to the world. And finally, you will hear that resolute refusal to give up hope in the heartbreaking story of the Panchen Lama, who was abducted by Chinese authorities when he was just 6 years old. His crime? Simply being recognized as the next spiritual leader of the Tibetan people. 30 years later, his absence still speaks louder than the CCP's power to control ever could. The members of NED's board of directors are so proud to confer these honors tonight and to lift up those whose courage reminds us that democracy's strength lies not in power, but in the yearning for human freedom and the brave people who defend it.
Hello, I'm Senator Todd Young. Congratulations to this year's Democracy Award recipients. Your courage and commitment to freedom inspires us all. Today, as we celebrate your achievements, we also recognize those around the world who continue to fight for the most basic of human rights. From Hong Kong to Tibet, and among the Uyghurs suffering under forced labor and internment, brave men and women are standing up against the Chinese Communist Party's oppression. Their struggle reminds us that the cause of liberty is universal, and it requires our continued solidarity. On behalf of the people of Indiana and the United States Senate, thank you for your dedication to advancing human freedom and democracy. You give hope to millions, and we stand with you.
And now, the first award presentation.
Once a nationally recognized legal scholar, Pastor Wang Yi left academia in the early 2000s with the simple conviction that China's deepest crisis was not political, but spiritual. He founded Early Rain Covenant Church, one of Chengdu's most vibrant house churches. It is part of a movement that worships outside the Chinese Communist Party's state-controlled system. In China, only 5 religions are legally recognized. Christian practice is confined to the state-run churches. Independent congregations like Early Rain are deemed illegal. Uncompromising in his faith, Pastor Wang spoke out against persecution. He insisted that true obedience belongs to God, not the state. His defiance, he said, was not political, but a calling to bear witness to another world. In 2018, police stormed Early Rain Covenant Church. They arrested Pastor Wang Yi and dozens of his followers, and he was sentenced to 9 years in prison for inciting subversion. Now in his 7th year behind bars, his courage endures as a symbol of conscience and conviction. He is proof that even behind bars, the light of faith cannot be extinguished.
To present the first award, please welcome to the stage Congressman Jason Crow.
Good evening. Thank you, Damon, to Ned, and to the board members for inviting me here tonight to present this award. It's a real honor for me to do it, particularly given the theme of this evening: faith, freedom, and courage. A theme that I've been thinking about for the last couple of days, but how they flow and interact together. I was raised in the Christian faith as a Catholic, and as a Catholic, we were always taught that words without acts are hollow. And particularly now, in a moment where a lot of talk and rhetoric around democracy, freedom, fighting for our rights is pretty common. But those who are actually willing to do the work, to take action and to sacrifice, are surprisingly few and far between. In fact, in the book of Matthew itself, Jesus talks about leadership and how the very basis of leadership is service. He says, those who want to be leaders among you must first be a servant of the people. That is a prerequisite for leading. One of those people who has done that service, who has made the sacrifice and actually done the work, is Pastor Wang Yi. And for that, he has sacrificed, and so has his family. Arrested in 2018, he previously led the Early Rain Covenant Church in Chengdu. He faced harassment and intimidation at the hands of authorities. And you heard from Peter earlier how authoritarian regimes target faith sometimes first because they cannot tolerate an alternative power. They cannot tolerate people believing in something bigger than themselves and bigger than the state. But Pastor Wang Yi has stayed the course unrelentingly, and for that he's been sentenced to 9 years in prison. Chinese authorities accuse him of inciting subversion of the state power and illegal business dealings. But his imprisonment does not shake his faith. He stays the course, focused for the people that he represents, for the people that he gives light to. It is truly my honor to represent somebody who is taking his faith and his responsibility to others and to his country and to his congregation seriously and making the sacrifices necessary to set the example for all of us. Because I, can garner great strength from that in our periods of darkness. Of course, Pastor Wang Yi is not here to accept this award, so it's my great pleasure to present the award on his behalf to Yaxue, the founder and editor of Ned Grantee China Change.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm honored to receive this award on behalf of Pastor Wang Yi. The website I run, ChinaChange.org, is dedicated to documenting the struggles of individuals and groups in China who are striving for freedom and the rule of law. To that end, we have written extensively and conducted hundreds of hours of interviews to understand the strategies and motivations of China's pro-democracy movement. With that in mind, I can say that the house church movement in China, despite relentless repression is one of the most dynamic and enduring drivers of social change because of its emphasis on human dignity, service, justice, and neighborly love. These are some of the values needed for democratic flourishing. Now, I would like to read a note from a member of the church. Here we go. Pastor Wang Yi's imprisonment and all that our church has endured are not an isolated event, nor is it confined to just the religious freedom of Christians in China. It is a microcosm of what countless Chinese prisoners of conscience are suffering today. We believe this word is also bestowed upon the brothers and sisters of an early rain covenant church who remain steadfast in faith despite continuous persecution. The word is also for pastors of China's many house churches who preach the gospel at great personal risk. In this award for Pastor Wang Yi, we see a recognition of all our compatriots who have paid the price for a freer, more just China, whether they are human rights lawyers, independent journalists, intellectuals, or ordinary, ordinary citizens. Thank you.
In 2017, as repression in East Turkestan deepened, Rushan Abbas founded Campaign for Uyghurs to confront the Chinese Communist Party's campaign of detention and erasure. A lifelong advocate for her people, Rushan has fought for Uyghurs' rights since the 1980s. As a university student in Urumqi, she organized protests. When she left her homeland, she carried that fight to the world stage, exposing Beijing's assault on faith and freedom and urging global leaders to take action. In September 2018, just days after she spoke on a public panel about China's internment system, her sister, Dr. Rushan Abbas, was taken from her home in Urumqi. She was then sentenced to 20 years in prison. Her only crime? Being Rushan's sister. But Rushan would not be silenced. Her sister's imprisonment became her cause. Sadly, her story is not unique. Nearly every Uyghur family has endured their own version of this pain. A parent detained, a sibling disappeared, a life uprooted without explanation. Even under harassment from Beijing, Rushan Abbas and Campaign for Uyghurs continue to raise international awareness, pursue accountability, and empower new advocates to defend the right to freedom, faith, and dignity.
To present the next award, please welcome to the stage board member of the National Endowment for Democracy, Senator Mel Martínez.
Well, good evening to all. What a moving and exciting evening this is as we speak of freedom, particularly the freedom to worship. It is my great honor to present Rushan Abbas' story, which is one of extraordinary courage, of a woman who has refused to let fear or distance silence her love for her family and her people. As someone whose own family fled tyranny in search of freedom, I know courage like this does not come easily. It is born of love, a love for family, for faith, and for the simple dignity of being free. When my family fled repression, we carried with us the belief that freedom was worth every sacrifice. That same belief fuels Rushan's work. She knows that the longing for freedom cannot be erased, not by walls, not by prisons, and not by propaganda. Through Campaign for Uyghurs, she has turned personal pain into global purpose, uniting governments, human rights advocates, and ordinary citizens to confront genocide and expose Beijing's system of forced labor and surveillance. Tonight, we honor Rushan Abbas and the Campaign for Uyghurs for their relentless defense of truth and human dignity. And we reaffirm our shared conviction that courage like hers is contagious, and that even in the darkest hours, freedom finds its defenders. On behalf of the National Endowment for Democracy, it is my profound honor to present the 2025 Democracy Award to Rushan Abbas and the Campaign for Uyghurs.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Nat, its board, leadership, staff, and Damon Wilson, and the founding chairman, Carl Gershman. And thank you, Senator, for this tremendous honor and for your strong support of our work. Thank you for recognizing the Uyghur people tonight. The award reflects Campaign for Uyghurs' dedication to advancing global democracy, defending natural rights, human dignity, and religious freedom, and empowering Uyghur women and youth to harness democratic systems as tools to drive meaningful change. What's happening to the Uyghurs is an active, full-fledged genocide marked by mass detention, forced sterilizations, forced abortions, forced labor, forced marriages, and the criminalization of entire faith and the entire Uyghur people. But the Chinese regime's repression does not stop at its borders. Uyghurs in diaspora who speak out are also targeted through keen punishment. My dear sister, Dr. Gulshan Abbas, a retired physician who dedicated her life to caring for others, has now spent 7 years in China's detention. She's being punished because I spoke out about the regime's human rights abuses and testified about the detention of my husband's entire family. 24 of his relatives disappeared. My sister should be spending her years surrounded by her children and grandchildren, living in peace. Instead, she has been unjustly imprisoned and denied the medical care she urgently needs, a cruel violation of international law and our shared humanity. 1 year after she was abducted, I left my career behind to fight for justice and the freedom for Gulshan and for my in-laws and for my people. I carry her photo with me wherever I go because this is the only way I can feel close to her, the only way I can remind myself why I keep fighting and why I cannot stay silent. And none of this work for the Uyghur cause would have been possible without Nat. Thank you for standing with Uyghur people in our darkest hours. In East Turkestan, Beijing is using technology to erase a population, targeting the essence of who we are, our faith, our ethnicity. It's orchestrating the world's largest forced labor scheme, tainting our food, our clothes, and infiltrating every aspect of our daily life. The surveillance system that enables this genocide is now being exported to advance an authoritarian agenda. This is the first high-tech genocide of modern history. Our homeland is a testing ground for a new model of totalitarianism, one that Beijing intends to spread worldwide, and so far with an alarming success. While whitewashing genocide, the regime uses economic and political power to intimidate the world and block accountability. This is not just the Uyghur issue anymore. It's China's war on faith, war on freedom and democracy, a war on women and the children, and a war on humanity itself. We stand at a turning point in history right now. Our actions and the choices today will determine the future of our children and our grandchildren. Our faith, hope, courage, and the support of each of you are all we have left to carry on. I accept this award on behalf of those voices are silenced, including my beloved sister. Nothing in this world will slow me down. Please join me in this fight to protect humanity and the future of the free world that we cherish. We are all responsible for what happens next. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage President and CEO of the National Endowment for Democracy, Damon Wilson.
Thank you, Rushan, for sharing your incredible story. I want to join Peter, Eileen, and the entire NED board in thanking everyone for joining us tonight. Look to your left, to your right, who's sitting in front, who's sitting behind you. There's a reason you're in this room. It's an extraordinary group. And we are so grateful to everyone here for what you do every day to support so many people working on behalf of justice, freedom, and democracy around the world. It's really a remarkable community. So hearing the stories tonight of Pastor Wang Yi, of Pastor Ezra, of Rushan, it reminds us of why we are in this fight together. They have faced the full weight of repression, and yet they have not yielded. They've showed the world that faith cannot be silenced. And at the Endowment, we have the privilege, indeed the responsibility, to stand with people like Rushan, to stand with people like Pastor Yi. Their bravery gives our mission its purpose, but courage like this doesn't just inspire. It grows stronger when it's recognized, when it's celebrated, and when it's connected. As Senator Martínez said, courage is contagious. So with our partners, the Endowment is helping to empower a global network of freedom, one that transcends borders, transcends languages and faith traditions. It's a network that's built not on politics, but on principle, that every person deserves the right to worship freely, to think independently, and to live with dignity. Across the world, millions are persecuted for their faith. Yet at NED, we turn people's travails, we help them turn their travails into triumphs. And we watch as our partners advance justice for crimes committed against the Rohingya Muslims in Burma and the Baha'i and Jewish communities in Iran. Our partners build peace, bridging divides in Pakistan and Sri Lanka. We support Christian communities that are targeted by extremist and violence in Nigeria across the Sahel, and faith leaders that are defending elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In Cuba and Nicaragua, we help priests defend them. We help defend priests, and we help them defend their faithful. And in Sudan, our partners right now are documenting atrocities that take place as we gather, including against religious communities that will provide a foundation for justice and peace in the future. So even in the darkest places, we see every day how faith endures. And it endures in whispered prayers and secret gatherings. It endures in the quiet conviction that no government, no political ideology, no machinery of fear can claim the human soul. And that conviction is why we're here tonight and why we honor those who live it. So before we continue with our awards tonight, I want to express my deep gratitude first to the remarkable NED Board of Directors. It is only with your support, this extraordinary groups of support, that we succeed. So thank you. I also, thank you, yes, it's a great board, as Peter said. I also want to give a shout out tonight. We are joined by two of our previous Democracy Service Medal honorees who are with us, the Qiang Pimpasiring of the Central Tibetan Administration. It is great to have you back in Washington. And to Rosa Maria Paya, whose father, Oswaldo Paya, we honored posthumously. Rosa Maria, you're in the house. Thank you for joining us tonight. I want to recognize our founding president, Carl Gershman, who helped kick off these awards. And I want to give a special recognition to members of our host committee tonight for whose generosity and belief in Ned's mission helped make this work possible. To our extraordinary chairs of the evening, Eileen, Donahoe, and Barbara Haig, thank you for your extraordinary leadership and your support. And I want to recognize our host committee, so please hold your applause, but to Judy and Peter Kovler, to Jane Kurzman, who's representing the Hereford Foundation, and Jane, thank you for allowing this event to double as your birthday celebration tonight. There's a cake afterwards. Daichi Lau is with us from the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy. Thank you for coming to Taipei, from Taipei to be with us. Jerzy Pomanowski of the European Endowment for Democracy, Dayton Ogden, Peter and Elizabeth Roskam, Nicole Rubin, my sister, and her husband Amir, and Ken Wallach. Thank you to our host committee tonight. I also just want to say we are deeply grateful to so many people who stepped forward to support the endowment this year. You're recognized in the program and on our screens. We had an outpouring of support. We remember and we welcome and we thank that. Thank you. And to my counterparts at the core institutes, our chairman recognized their chairs, but it is a privilege for me to work every day with these remarkable folks in Common Cause. To Shauna Better-Blau, who's here from the Solidarity Center, to Dan Twining of IRI, Tammy Kaufman-Wittes of NDI, and Andrew Wilson of SIPE. It is a great gang to be part of. Thank you for your partnership. And finally, I just want to give a shout out, and I promise I'll end, a shout out to the dedicated, talented, and determined team at the endowment. They're an amazing group. They build the relationships of trust that are necessary to do this tough work. They are the democracy entrepreneurs. They're out there deploying venture capital to empower freedom. Their work ensures that we deliver on our congressional mandates so that the American people continue to stand by those who seek freedom around the world. I am so proud to work with them. Thank you, team. So our honorees tonight remind us that courage is contagious and that every act of conscience strengthens the cause of freedom. So as we continue the program, we'll meet more of those voices, and whose work will keep the cause alive. And may their example call each of us to stand a little taller, to believe a little deeper in the power of faith and freedom. It is now my great pleasure to introduce a message from Representative John Moolenaar, Chair of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, and to welcome him on behalf of the endowment as the newest member of the Board of Directors. So please turn your attention to the screens.
Thank you, Damon, and thank you to everyone at the National Endowment for Democracy for this tremendous honor. It's a privilege to join the NED board in an honorary capacity and to speak to you tonight as you honor so many who have dedicated their lives to advancing freedom and human dignity. For more than 40 years, NED has carried forward a simple but powerful truth that the desire to live free and to build a future for one's family without fear is universal. As chairman of the House Select Committee on China, I've seen how the CCP's authoritarian model seeks to suffocate that universal aspiration, not only in China, but far beyond its borders. However, I've also seen how courage, truth, and faith can prevail even in the darkest times. Tonight, we celebrate that courage and the life's work of Xiao, who has documented the Chinese people's fight against censorship, and Rushan, Abbas, whose advocacy gives voice to Uyghurs in camps, and in Pastor Wang Yi, who has been imprisoned for his faith, and in those still seeking the Panchen Lama's freedom. Their bravery reminds us what's at stake and why freedom must always be defended. Thank you.
And now, our next award presentation.
In 1989, hundreds of thousands of Chinese citizens filled the streets, calling for reform, freedom, and democracy. They were not met with dialogue, but with bullets and tanks. For Qiang, that moment in Tiananmen Square changed everything. He left his career in physics to devote his life to defending human rights and the truth. In 2003, he founded China Digital Times, a bilingual platform that exposes the Chinese Communist Party's censorship and amplifies the voices it seeks to silence. Today, China Digital Times stands as a living archive of the truth, countering propaganda, documenting repression, and preserving the record of the Chinese people's courage and creativity. By preserving the humor, code words, and social commentary of Chinese citizens before they are censored, China Digital Times captures the ingenuity and resilience of a people refusing to be defined by the CCP. As Beijing tightens its grip, China Digital Times and Qiang keep a vital window open to the unfiltered, authentic perspectives of the Chinese people, proving that no regime, however powerful, can silence a people's voice.
Please welcome to the stage board member of the National Endowment for Democracy, Congressman Joaquin Castro.
Good evening, everyone. Damon, and to the staff and my fellow board members, it's wonderful to do this incredible and important work with you. And it's an honor to present this award tonight to Xiao, the editor-in-chief of the China Digital Times, who has never stopped speaking truth to power. When authoritarian leaders fear their own people, when they do everything possible to keep the truth from them, they do what the Chinese Communist Party has done. They tighten control over information and clamp down on free speech. The CCP operates the largest, most sophisticated, and most repressive censorship apparatus in the entire world. Xiao has refused to be censored and refused to be silenced. A theoretical physicist by training, he became a human rights activist after witnessing the horror of the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989, an event which saw thousands of unarmed protesters murdered by the Chinese military because they protested against their own government. In 2003, he launched China Digital Times, which has become the world's foremost source documenting the Chinese people's struggle for freedom. Data shows the Chinese Digital Times website is one of the first destinations for a large number of Chinese people looking to breach the Great Firewall. CDT also plays a major role in enabling people inside China to communicate with each other by preserving and redistributing censored social media. There is nothing more frightening to an authoritarian government than a people united by the truth. For his lifetime commitment to freedom, to countering repression and censorship with a dedication to empowering the Chinese people with an alternative pathway to information and to the truth, it's my honor to present Xiao with the NED Award, the NED Democracy Award in 2025.
I received this award in the form of Goddess of Democracy because I began my journey when her original body was crushed by tanks on Tiananmen Square. So it's not just symbolic, it's personal. I made a vow that day. I would work for this until one day I can come back to China, come back to Tiananmen Square with flowers laid down for the people who died for freedom. I kept that promise. Today, I want to say this to you, Goddess of Democracy. that we will return China together to Tiananmen Square with flowers. Thank you, Ned. Thank you for everyone. I'm deeply honored to accept on behalf of China Digital Times team, past and present, and countless of netizens inside of Great Firewall, whose courage to speak, document, and share truth, keep the light of freedom alive. It's your courage, it's your quiet defiance built the moral foundation of China Digital Times work. I want to acknowledge all my co-awardees, and particularly my gratitude goes to National Endowment for Democracy for recognizing not only our work, but the conviction behind it that truth matters and every voice counts. Yes, at CDT, our mission is speak truth to power, but not with hatred, just with clarity and courage. In China's digital authoritarian dark night, words, images, testimonies are constantly erased, but each act of remembrance, every fragment of reality that survives deletion become part of collective memory that no censorship can extinguish. I live in the Bay Area now, so I cannot help to say a few words about AI. Our challenge are evolving, and one that may define our era is AI. Information control is the core of authoritarian stability. Democracy, in contrast, depends on openness. Under authoritarian regime, AI enforces control and surveillance. Under democracy, it must enlarge human freedom and our moral imagination. The future of AI will test our technologies, but more importantly, test our values and our humanity. Freedom begins with truth, and the truth, when held in collective memory, becomes the seed of a freer future. Thank you.
Please turn your attention to a special video message from Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy.
Hi everybody, I'm Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, and thank you so much for allowing me to address you virtually. Congratulations to the 2025 NED Democracy Awards, the National Endowment for Democracy's Democracy Awards. And today's winners are very well known to all of us: Rushan Abbas, Xiao, Qiang, Pastor Wang Yi, and the 11th Panchen Lama, each a symbol of extraordinary courage in the face of repression from the Chinese Communist Party. Look, democracy may bend, but it never breaks because of courageous people like the people that you're honoring. So I just want to say thank you for doing this. Thank you for everybody so supportive of these folks and the countless others who are toiling, sometimes in obscurity or silence, also fighting for democracy. We should always stand with them. Thank you so much, and God bless.
And now our next award presentation.
In 1995, His Holiness the Dalai Lama recognized 6-year-old Gedhun Choekyi Nyima as the 11th Panchen Lama, a spiritual leader whose lineage has for centuries played a central role in recognizing the reincarnation of the Dalai Lamas. Just 3 days after the announcement, Chinese authorities abducted the boy and his family, making him the world's youngest political prisoner. 30 years have passed since that day. His fate still remains unknown. As the Dalai Lama turns 90 this year, the future of Tibet's spiritual leadership hangs in the balance. The Chinese Communist Party, determined to control that future, appointed its own state-approved Panchen Lama just months following the boy's abduction. This is an attempt to seize authority over Tibet's religious leadership so that Beijing, not Tibetan Buddhists, decides who will be the next Dalai Lama. Despite this interference, Tibetans continue to revere Gedhun Choekyi Nyima as the true Panchen Lama, a living symbol of their faith, identity, and resistance. The Tibetan struggle represents the right of all faith communities to choose their own spiritual leaders free from authoritarian control, and the unshakable conviction that truth and faith will always prevail over tyranny.
To present the final award, please welcome to the stage board member of the National Endowment for Democracy, Alyssa Ayers.
Good evening, and what an honor to be with all of you tonight and to recognize these remarkable leaders. The story that we've just witnessed on video captures the heart of this evening, how the power of belief endures even when every attempt is made to extinguish it. 30 years ago, a 6-year-old boy was taken from his home because he was recognized as the 11th Panchen Lama, and his crime was that he was chosen by his people, not by the party. Since that day, he and his family have never been seen again. He became and remains the world's youngest political prisoner. His disappearance is not an isolated act of cruelty. It is part of a deliberate campaign to control the soul of Tibet. And the party, of course, chose its own approved Panchen Lama. In Tibet today, monasteries are surveilled. Monks and nuns are forced to denounce the Dalai Lama. Nearly 1 million Tibetan children are separated from their families and raised in state-run schools that strip them of their language and faith. The Chinese Communist Party has even declared that it will appoint its own Dalai Lama, an act that would violate centuries of spiritual tradition and strike at the heart of religious freedom itself. Yet even in the face of such control, the story of the Panchen Lama endures. His disappearance has become its own form of witness, and a reminder that truth and faith cannot be dictated, and that even silence can become a form of defiance. The succession of the Dalai Lama is not a political event. It is a sacred process of faith. Preserving that process is essential to the survival of Tibetan Buddhism and to the universal principle that spiritual authority must never be decided by the state. At NED, we speak clearly about the CCP's mass detention of Uyghurs and its efforts to erase Tibetan identity. We do so because freedom of conscience and the right to choose one's spiritual leaders belongs to every community. And that is what makes the story of the Panchen Lama so powerful. His absence is not emptiness, it is presence. It reminds us that the soul of a people cannot be appointed and their faith cannot be replaced. We are so deeply honored tonight to be joined by Abbot Sikyo Rinpoche, who will accept the award on behalf of the Panchen Lama. He is the abbot of Tashi Lunpo Monastery and the longtime spiritual caretaker of the Panchen Lama's legacy. He and the Tashi Lunpo Monastery are living in freedom, albeit in exile, in India. The Panchen Lama's life and leadership embody the quiet strength of a faith that has refused to fade, even after decades of exile and persecution. Tonight, by honoring the 11th Panchen Lama, we honor all Tibetans who have refused to let their faith be rewritten. It is my great honor on behalf of the National Endowment for Democracy to present the 2025 Democracy Service Medal to the 11th Panchen Lama. Please welcome to the stage Abbot Sikyo Rinpoche of Tashi Lunpo Monastery.
Pimi choosing you would Zamni she did even Chino Gonsa Kim Gunchim Chodang, Gunsi Bencher and Butcher, number Nila, Kusum Kuchang Wondo Dane, Ari Choso Kongogi, Tumi Nambadang, Ari Manzo Cabetine Kangi, Toto Kushap, Damon Wilson, Cho, Kongosigong, Bambasirin Chogi, U Diri Pepe, Kunjan Yongla, Samdi Shugudang, Gain Tirin, Dir, Chungsir Muchi Chogi, Kutsap Shude, Dilu Manzo Shabshu Senda Dishin, Molin Shuguin.
Members of Congress, NED Board, NED President Damon Wilson, Sikyong Bembatsiring, and other distinguished guests. I am humbled to accept this award on behalf of the 11th Panchen Lama, who is not free to receive it himself since his forced disappearance by the CCP in 1995.
Pimi choosing Yiwuti, Chino Konsa Kamgu Chumbacho, Zenju de Pemne, Pimi Diduda, Pedent and the Seviche, Kungen Zemegi, Tuguru Shemito, Gunsi Pension Kunjin Chuba Chimbachoki, Penando, Ram Mirigi Chedo, Lord of Chimbe, Gamala, Tungze, Kanungi, Tabzedang, Tabzenang, Dorna, Gunsi Pension Kunjin Chuba Chimbo, Choni, Pe Gekabda, Mirigi Chedo, Kuso, Lodangi, Bao Chimboshin.
When China invaded Tibet in 1950, the 10th Panchen Lama faced an impossible choice. He chose to remain inside Tibet, believing he could defend his people from within, while His Holiness the Dalai Lama worked tirelessly to protect his people abroad. For his act of courage, the 10th Panchen Lama paid a terrible price. He was imprisoned by China for over a decade, later dying under mysterious circumstances. For speaking truth, he paid with his life.
Gedhun Choekyi Nyima Cho, Panchen Lama Yangsi do Wenzi Nangway Lin Xie Kong Zenji Chebe, Nizu Dini, Tengrab Samlin Giji Lugunang, Chibashi Zenji Karsong Chamendo Kurwa, Tuyun Ringshu de Chayu.
In 1995, following centuries-old Buddhist tradition, the Dalai Lama recognized a 6-year-old boy as the reincarnation of the 10th Panchen Lama. Within days, that child was abducted by China. 30 years later, the world has still not seen or heard from this child. His fate remains one of the longest-running cases of enforced disappearance in modern history.
Yamarashungi, Chibashik, Dendre, Nyansap Chemboshik Tone, Zenji Chekudun Kanyi Shena, Pe Mirigi Ngagula, Namla Nimandawa Sala Gawa Panchen She, Shesu Yobashin, Gawa Yapse Namni War, Lalo Getawadang, Pensun Yangsi Ngunzin Zezu Sogi, Longo Gatala, Lugu Dembe Pegi, Tomo Maimbe Chulugi, Lamsushik Yobe Yin, Kesi, Panchen Kuntin Chukchiba Chimbacho, Yamargi, Zenwo do Tsumise, Maombar, Gawang Kuntin Chushiba Chimbu Yangsi, Zetsugi, Tugin Shengela.
Why is a country as powerful as China so threatened by a child? The answer is simple. This child is the second highest authority in Tibetan Buddhism. He is, or should be, the future leader tasked with helping recognize the next Dalai Lama, who just turned 90 this year. Tibetans say the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama are like the sun and moon. When one sets, the other rises to lead us. To abduct one is to plunge the Tibetan people into darkness. And that is precisely why China took him.
Yamara Shungjogi, Samlo the Tumbe, Chulugi, Uti Zumangunzin Cheba Sol, Dena, Chede Rangon Zangmashi Namyang, Toptatel, Yang Konzo Misheba Shini, Chela Chobe, Teba Shevani, Nang Semni, Yamlin Chagushi Imbale, Chini Chepsiki, Zenge Wo, Nang Semgi Gua Mebe, Tebe, Nandi, Namyang, Nuptab Me.
We must be clear about what all of this means. If China believes it has the power to disappear a 6-year-old religious leader, if it believes it can rewrite religious tradition for political gain, if it believes it can decide who people are allowed to believe in, then no person of faith in China is safe. Not Buddhists, not Muslims, not Christians. If China can replace authentic Buddhist leaders, it will do the same to imams, priests, and pastors. But here is where Beijing is making a profound error. Authoritarians fail to understand that faith is the domain of the sacred. It is foundational to freedom. It cannot be controlled by a political power.
Tengi Gongsa Chogi, Kindumba Chepsi Junsu Shiki, Kor Sungap, Kongi, Zongkana, Yudu, Jingnang Chishu Kandashi Jungwin Kor Kandi Nawa, the Lendo Kindumba De, Dongde Tang the Chiwi Jingnang member, Narju Dongkenla, Yingje Labe, Jingnang Chishu Jungshe, Sumbadi, Tabadang, Chela Chobe, Samlu, Doshu, Omadi, Yin, Deriten, Zawangi, Seshun Chindashi Yinyang, Namyang, Chedele, Number Gel Missy.
I once heard the Dalai Lama share a story of a Tibetan monk who survived years of torture in a Chinese prison. When asked what he feared most while in prison, the monk did not say pain or death. He said, "I feared losing compassion for my captors." That is the power of faith. No prison, no army, and no regime, no matter how powerful, can extinguish it.
Tadun Ari Mangzu Kabe Tine Kangi, Ule Nabatang, Tishin Tirin Diri Pepe, Ari Choso Kongogi, Tumi Namba, Shenyang Tabar, Geji Chede, Rawang, Che, Tado, Kapjurananke Yongla, Ning Tabane, Gadin Cheshu, Tuji Che.
I'd like to conclude by extending my deepest gratitude to the NED Board of Directors, the U.S. Congress, and all who continue to stand for religious freedom. Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage Damon Wilson, President and CEO of the National Endowment for Democracy.
To all of our recipients, we are honored to have the opportunity to honor you tonight. Thank you for that privilege. And as our chairman said at the beginning, to all of our guests, you were hearing tonight some difficult stories, tough stories, but in those stories, we find grace, we find strength, and yes, Mr. Chairman, we find joy by standing behind these people. So this concludes the 2025 National Endowment for Democracy Awards. I want to invite everyone to stay with us, join us downstairs in the reception where there is food, beverages, and birthday cake. And I will invite all of our honorees and our speakers to just join on the stage for one last group photograph. That concludes our evening. Thank you for joining us tonight.